My name's Heidi Hopkins. I'm with the Humane Society of the United States. I formerly was a wild horse and burro specialist with the BLM before I came to do more research-oriented focus on fertility control in both horses, wild horses and burros. So last year, one of my questions to everybody was how you all elevated the status of burros this past year. I think that was the one point I wanted to bring up, and Eric before me really illustrated it perfectly with just the basic lack of research and knowledge that we really have about these animals compared to a lot of other large mammals in the world. It's just astounding how little we really do know. And so kudos to Eric for him raising the status of burros and the work that he's doing. But more importantly, I'd love to give kudos to the other Eric Davis and his wife Cindy for hosting this event and truly elevating the status of burros and donkeys all over the world. So yay, thank you for that. So again, I think this happened to me last year. The people that talked before me said a lot of what I was going to say. Burros are protected in this country with the Wild and Free Roaming Horses and Burro Act. And this was, I think, people were talking earlier, not only, because they're living symbols of the historic and pioneer spirit of the West, and they contribute to the diversity of life forms within our nation, and they enrich the lives of all of us in the room. So that is right out of the law itself. And so I think it's important to remember why we're doing some of this stuff. Burros are also very bold and brave against predators, and they're thinkers. They're a little bit different than their equine counterparts. They really think through issues, and they're very extremely well adapted to life in the desert, as the wells that they dig were illustrated. And I was just in Arizona. I have pictures of those wherever Eric went. I don't see. I was just there like a month ago, and I took some. I almost put them in the slide, but I didn't, so I'll have to show them to you later. We think there's very few little work done, 10 to 20% annual population growth rate. Again, nobody's eating them. Their populations increase rapidly, and then I'm afraid to show this next picture after what he just said, but then you get some poor range condition, and then animals become poor quality, poor body condition, and then inevitably what the Bureau of Land Management does is then gather those animals, usually with the helicopter. And this is just a picture of the last 10 years, how many have been removed versus how many have been adopted through their program. And, more have been removed than adopted. And I think that number is actually a little bit higher than 822 right now, but that was just from the actual statistics of what is sitting in corrals right now, all the animals that have been removed from the wild. And are sitting in government corrals right now, costing taxpayers about $1,300 a year to feed each of those animals. I did the math, but I can't remember. It's way too late to figure out how much money that is, but it's like over $1 million each year that we're feeding these guys. Removed from the wild. So that the number that have been removed from the wild each year is in the blue, and then the number of those that have been adopted are the red number. So all those little yellow circles are the years where more were removed than adopted. And where are they? In holding facilities, government-run holding facilities, again, where the government spends about $1,300 a year each individual animal, feeding them and caring for them. Well, I'd sure like to say I had something to do with that, but I'm not so sure. The Humane Society in 2013 began some intensive work with an adoption program, a training and adoption program, where we paid trainers and gave them incentives to train animals and then find qualified adoptive homes for them. So I think that might have something to do with it. As also, though, there's been a shift in management and the BLM. From the previous years. From the buildup from previous years, yeah. So all the leftovers from the previous years, or there's a lot of births that happen once they're captured. Pretty much all the jennies are going to have a baby once they get to the corrals eventually. So obviously this presents a problem. There's a lot of money being spent on animals that are removed and are not found homes for. Future removals are necessary to maintain the population levels, but that again creates this long-term economic commitment from us, the taxpayers. So that's where a majority of my talk comes in here. Solutions to this problem, there are more than what I'll be talking about, but the humane and socially acceptable and allowed by law are long-term management goals on the range that should include growth suppression. If we can slow their population growth rather than remove, there is some work done, and I apologize here, some work done showing that the gathers themselves increase the number of animals that are being born. So, and I can get you all that information afterwards, but there was a study where they were showing, a population of horses that were not subject to removal and one that was subject to removal, and the births of the ones that were subject to removal were over 30% higher than those that were removed. So we're creating a horrible cycle of just increasing the number of births and creating a larger problem. So contraception is obviously where I'm going with this. There are tools readily available that show minimum effects on health and behavior that are humane. PZP is a drug that the Humane Society of the United States has been involved with for over 20 years. It's a glycoprotein from pig ovaries, and it basically creates it prevents the sperm from attaching to the egg, works like a vaccine, and just prevents contraception from occurring. Anyways, I'm sorry, safe, effective, minimal effects on behavior besides the fact that you're preventing them from having babies, which obviously is an effect on their behavior. There's different ways to, you can remotely deliver or inject by hand, but it is an injection. I was talking to somebody earlier. Sure would be handy if we could figure out how to feed this to them, but that is not available, that technology. So it does need to be injected into the female. There are challenges. I don't want to stand up here and act like this is just a really easy solution. Amy discussed it a little bit already. Again, I already mentioned there is a lot of research that still needs to happen for us to be able to know There's a lot of work that has been done on horses, but not so much on burros. The timing of the vaccination is important in horses. We don't know if it's important for burros or not. Burros seem to have a little more wide open breeding and birthing cycle than horses do, so we're not so sure if we need to give the drug at a certain time of year or if we just apply it when we can gain access to the animal, which is our next. Accessing the burros either through a normal gather or with bait trapping, which is what we'd really like to see more of. Bait trapping takes a lot of time and a lot of patience, and helicopter gathers can happen very quickly and very large numbers of animals. And then, we can dart the drug into animals, but you've got to be within under 50 yards of the animal and be a really good shot. Gaining access to some animals in some herds is pretty easy. That's a pretty easy distance in some herds, and others it's next to impossible if you're just going to do it opportunistically. But if you're going to do it within, after you trap them into a corral or something, it makes things a little easier. But then you've also got the issue of identification of the individual animals. We've done this in herds of horses. Horses are much easier to tell the difference between facial markings, leg markings, whatnot. Work we're currently proposing right now will probably be freeze branding the individuals, so when we do bait trap them, we'll individually identify them with a freeze brand. So that, again, is a challenge in how we can do that. So, again, like I mentioned, there's been only one study on feral burros, and it showed great potential, over 94% effective, 96 I think it was, 96% effective, but it was a small number of animals. I think it was 16 or 17 animals, and this was in the Virgin Islands. Again, I think I mentioned there are some differences between burros and horses, so there's a lot that we still have to learn. Again, burros seem to have a completely different social structure, and horses have a much tighter window of breeding and birthing, and that might make a difference in some of our results that we might see. But there are ways around all these challenges, and we truly believe that there needs just to be a shift in the way things are done, and that, as Amy already alluded to, is extremely challenging when you're working with the federal government. Things need to change on a whole bunch of different levels in order for some of this work to happen. Gaining access to the animals, just tricky ways of doing things. This was a project that we did trying to make sure that when the horses came into this water source, we could be hiding in a blind to dart them, but we had to make sure they walked a very specific way so they would pass us at a very specific distance, and but we figured it out and it worked. It took us forever, but it did. So there's ways to do things creatively to make things happen, but patience is really your number one tool. And like the photo documentation that you can get from these cameras now are amazing. Like Eric just showed us, lots of amazing technology that should be able to help us with a lot of these challenges. So I really made this short because I knew it was going to be really late. So just some take-home messages. There needs, like I said, a new way of doing business. It's going to take a while to get the BLM, there's horse and burro specialists in these areas that are in charge of writing these documents and, going out and managing, measuring the vegetation and doing all these things. So we can't ask that individual to go out and sit with a dart gun for 12 hours a day trying to gain access to these animals. So it's going to take, a different scenario. You can hire an individual to do this work. And again, that's a whole nother ball of wax when you're talking with the federal government and how many people are doing what work and does it make sense economically. And there have been several studies, and I don't think I have a slide for that, and I apologize, but several studies that have looked at the economics of using fertility control. And one was stated that it was fertility control with PCP could reduce population management costs by 14%, or $6 million a year. And the other one stated then in one hypothetical HMA, the BLM could save approximately $8 million over 12 years by using fertility control drugs. So, that work has been done. We know the economics behind it it totally adds up. So, let's see, different techniques need to be used in different areas. I was just in an area in Arizona where, you could literally walk up to the animals and do whatever you wanted with them, but then you drove 5 miles out of town and you wouldn't be able to get within 100 yards. So obviously there's a lot of things, different techniques for different areas, different animals. Change won't happen overnight, even if we go out there and dart as many animals as we could. We're not really going to see that population level effect for years to come. And repeated treatments will definitely improve the efficacy. The more you treat them, the better the drug works. There is 2 forms of the drug. I failed to mention that, and I apologize. A 1-year and a 2-year, and there's in the process of developing longer acting drugs that are much needed here in the West, where access to animals is a huge problem. So the longer we can get them to work, the better. And I guess with that, I'll leave it. I know it's late, and that was really, really fast, but I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. Yeah, I think it's also seasonal, though. Definitely, if they aren't, then, but it won't continue to happen throughout the entire year. So there has been some work on that, and it's not. I guess the work that I know of is that there's. We've showed that the drug does not affect the foals being born out of the normal, March to July sort of foaling period, which then would say that isn't occurring throughout the entire year, because then if it were, then you would be having, and there's always some outliers. There is always a foal born in, November or something. But if it were to be occurring as people assume it would, then you would be seeing this gigantic window of births happening, and we're just not seeing that. Well, if she's not in season, then she won't be repeatedly getting bred. So that is her defense mechanism for not constantly being in season, and she won't constantly be in season.
Yeah, from a physiologic standpoint, PDP affects the ability for the ovum to become fertilized. It doesn't affect the mare's estrus cycle. Okay, so she's going to cycle as often as a non-pregnant mare is going to cycle, which is 21 days. and seasonally, depending on the latitude.
So the question now.
He said it so much better than I said it.
So how to know the exact time to give the bees? Because
So,
every time.
right, and that's what I was saying in horses. We know a little bit more than we do in burros. Burros seem to have a broader seasonality, a broader season, I guess, than horses do. But in horses, we found that January, February, maybe December, January, February is the best time to give the drug, so that the titer levels, the levels of the antibodies in the mare or jenny would be at its peak during her season in March through June or something. So that's sort of the best time. Again, we don't really know that for burros yet. Something we definitely need to look into. The behaviors that GnRH potentially has and will affect are much greater than PZP. PCB is very basic, just changing the layer of the egg and providing that protection from fertilization. So where GnRH is going to just completely affect any kind of breeding behavior the animal would have. And that's a huge difference in the two drugs. And I do know there has been some work with horses, but I didn't think it was that great, like you mentioned. I thought it was less than spectacular in the results they were getting on wild herds. Yeah, it's a new, it's also new-ish, and I think the jury is still out. But again, the big difference there is the behavior aspect. PZP is going to be far less disturbing to normal natural behaviors.